Welcome to the Climate and Coordination RCast, where every week we'll be discussing topics related to all things climate change and RChain's role in the solution. We will be discussing technologies that can adapt and coordinate massive amounts of data like never before, forming social architectures that grow collective intelligence, sharing and evaluating data planetarily, all while maintaining personal privacy and personal data ownership. A new decentralized economy is forming as we move from the third industrial revolution, digitization, to the fourth, decarbonization. By building a co-op, built on a correct by construction, concurrent, scalable solution, RChain is structured to build out the new technology that will be required for a flourishing regenerative planet. Please join us on this journey.
Welcome, everybody, to our next installment of the Climate and Coordination RCast. We're really happy to be able to continue these weekly discussions about all things climate and coordination and a few other things, too. So this week, I thought it might be nice, Darryl, if you start out with some of the really fascinating information about these blockchain-based cities, these smart cities. I have some things I wanted to highlight, but I thought it might be nice if you start out this time. So feel free to take it away, and I'll jump in shortly.
Thanks, Nora. So I've prepared some notes that are kind of like a roundabout way of getting to the point. So hopefully the connections will make sense. So there's something that has really exposed itself globally over the last few weeks through the tragic snuff movie The World Witnessed as a unit, by globally gathering around our screens and observing the death of George Floyd. There was something that kind of really exposed itself about the human condition here, and that something is empathy. So empathy, a lot of times I think, gets confused with sympathy and gets kind of turned into kind of a fluffy word, but it's actually a vital part of our survival. The ability to feel what someone else is feeling. It can be said that it's actually the thing that makes us uniquely human. To witness the movement that arose first in cities in the US and then spread to cities around the world has been incredibly powerful. Though the problem that is being addressed is connected to a cultural struggle that's unique to the United States, the whole world feels empathy, and demonstrations are being organized globally. So empathy is connected to our superpower, the one that Greg talks about, our social skills, our ability to organize as a group. Some academics believe that the discovery of music led to the rapid evolution of mirror neurons in humans by allowing us to share the same experience with each other through collectively observing the mathematical patterns of sound and a shared united experience of the cycles of time through rhythm. We started to develop or rapidly expand our empathic skills. Music provided a play space for that. So we developed a very strong growth of mirror neurons in our brains outside of any other species. And so mirror neurons are when somebody observes something, when someone observes someone else doing something, it triggers the same neurons that get triggered when we experience the same thing ourselves. And mirror neurons exist in other animals, but humans have particularly developed ones. So we have this advanced development of mirror neurons in our brains that allow us to really organize when we need to. And I've talked about this guy before, but I'll say it again. So futurist thinker Jeremy Rifkin talks about the empathic civilization, how our social groups expanded as we continued to evolve through the spreading out of our empathic skills, starting from tribes, leading to agrarian societies, to city-states, and finally nation-states. So if I could, I'd like to share my screen and just show a kind of the last 4 minutes of this this YouTube video, because I think it kind of really gets the point across.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's see if this works. So
to empathize is to civilize. To civilize is to empathize. With forage or hunter societies, communication only extended to the local tribe and shouting distance. Everyone over in the next mountain was the alien other. So empathy only extended to blood ties. When we went to the great hydraulic agricultural civilization, script allowed us to extend the central nervous system and to annihilate more time and space and bring more people together. And the differentiation of skills and the increasing selfhood not only led to theological consciousness, but empathy now extended to a new fiction. And that is, instead of just associating with one's blood ties, we detribalized and began association based on religious ties. So a new fiction, Jews start to see all other Jews as extended family and empathize with Jews. Christians start to see all other Christians as extended family and empathize with Christians. Muslims, the same. When we get to the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution, and we extend markets now to larger areas and create a fiction called the nation state. And all of a sudden, the Brits start to see others in Britain as extended family. The Germans start to see Germans as extended family. The Americans as Americans. There was no such thing as Germany. There was no such thing as France. These are fictions. But they allow us to extend our family so that we can have loyalties and identities based on the new complex energy communication revolutions we have that annihilate time and space. But if we have gone from empathy in blood ties to empathy in religious associational ties, to empathy based on national identification, is it really a big stretch to imagine the new technologies allowing us to connect our empathy to the human race writ large in a single biosphere? And what reason would we stop here at the nation-state identity and only have ideological empathy or theological-based empathy or tribal-based blood tie empathy? We have the technology that allows us to extend the central nervous system and to think viscerally as a family, not just intellectually. When that earthquake hit Haiti, and then Chile, but especially Haiti, within an hour the Twitters came out, and within 2 hours some cell phone videos, YouTube, and within 3 hours the entire human race was in an empathic embrace coming to the aid of Haiti. If we were, as the Enlightenment philosophers suggested, in materialistic, self-interested, utilitarian, pleasure-seeking, it couldn't account for the response to Haiti. Apparently, 175,000 years ago in the Rift Valley of Africa, there were about 10,000 anatomically modern human beings walking the grasslands, our ancestors. The geneticists located one database woman. It's a database line. Apparently, her genes passed to everyone in this room tonight. The other ladies didn't make it. Gets even more strange. They located a single male. This is a database line for genetics. They call him the Y chromosome Adam. Apparently, a fairly potent guy. His genes passed to everyone in this room. So here's the news. 6.8 billion people at various stages of consciousness, theological, ideological, psychological, dramaturgical. We're all fighting with each other with different ideas about the world. And well, guess what? We all came from two people. The Bible got this one right. We could have come from many. But the point is, we have to begin thinking as an extended family. We have to broaden our sense of identity. We don't lose the old identities of nationhood and our religious identities, and even our blood ties. But we extend our identity so we can think of the human race as our fellow sojourners and our other creatures here as part of our evolutionary family, and the biosphere as our community. We have to rethink the human narrative. If we are truly homo empathicus, then we need to bring out that core nature. Because if it doesn't come out and it's repressed by our parenting, our educational system, our business practice and government, the secondary drives come. The narcissism, the materialism, the violence, the aggression. If we can have a global debate, let it start here from the British Royal Society for the Arts, which apparently you're doing, to begin rethinking human nature, to bring out our empathic sociability so that we can rethink the institutions of society and prepare the groundwork for an empathic civilization.
Okay, that was awesome.
That was
Yeah,
awesome.
that was great. I think I've actually seen that talk another time before, and I have some comments, but I'm going to let you finish first before I jump in.
Yeah, if you put the link in the in our channel.
I'm actually reading a book by N.K. Jamison that amazingly is also about this sort of expanded or extended empathic consciousness. But it's a fiction book, and she talks about how various people can become the living embodiment of cities or larger units of human cohabitation, and thereby work together, through these sort of avatars, so to speak, to begin to address some of the challenges that we face on a more on larger and larger scales. So it's quite interesting that you would bring this up today, because I happen to be reading this right now, about this notion, like literally just minutes before I joined the call.
Yeah,
Cool.
actually, I have another connection to make as well. I was just watching a really fascinating talk from MIT on YouTube. Sometimes they make their lectures available for the public, which is a really amazing resource. Anyway, it's by Patrick Winston. It's called How to Speak. And basically, it's an entire lecture about how to give lectures or just how to present information in a engaging and in a good way, in a quality way. Anyway, so this talk mentions that over and over they ask students and people who watch lectures, just anybody, people could be at work or whatever, if they prefer slides or if they prefer a blackboard, or I suppose a whiteboard. And it's really interesting that over and over people say that they prefer the whiteboard or the blackboard, so somebody actually physically writing on a surface rather than a PowerPoint presentation or a slide. And I think it's really interesting that people choose that. And he mentioned the empathic mirroring, which is that when he's writing, you can imagine yourself writing, and there's a speed at which it happens that's better for digesting information. So anyway, when you were talking about it, Darryl, about empathy, and I was thinking about how it actually helps us learn information more quickly, but also it goes to a deeper level, because you can't empathize with a PowerPoint the same way you can empathize watching somebody draw or write on a board. And actually, I think that that's why this person probably put together that presentation that you just showed us in a cartoon, because we're all watching him draw and write the words, and I think it makes it a lot more engaging. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that RSA Animate, I love those guys. They make some great ones. So here's the thing, we are like, where do we go from here, right? Like we've now kind of, expanded our empathic circles to nation states, but we're full up. The future can't be thought of in the same terms of expansion. As Greg says, we must now think in terms of regenerative as opposed to expansive. So we need to develop a sea change in our thinking as a species towards a flourishing system of humans on this planet, rather than a collection of nations that compete over resources. So here's the thing. The thing that I just showed you was 10 years old, and so he brings up Haiti as an example. But if it was right now, of course he'd bring up George Floyd as an example of the power of empathy around the world. And what I found interesting is that it seems to happen in cities. And so because we have to move away from the idea of expansion, perhaps the next evolution of our ability to coordinate and our expansion of our empathic universe that we seem to be exploring is back to visiting cities again. it was just incredible to see footage of just all these demonstrations happening in all of these major cities around the world. So, perhaps it's a return to the city in the future of our evolution as a so-called civilized society. The word civil means city. The term cosmopolitan means having constituent elements from all over the world or from many different parts of the world. So thinking of a cosmopolitan city, I spent the last 20 years of my life in the Toronto area, which is the fourth largest city in North America. So it's my frame of reference to a cosmopolitan city. And in Toronto, we have Little Italy, you have Chinatown, there's the Bloor Danforth area, which is Greek. There are Hispanic areas, there's a Jewish area, there's a Jamaican and West Indies area butted up right next to them. There's Muslim areas in Brampton and Mississauga, et cetera, et cetera. And all these different cultures are represented and more often than not celebrated with scheduled events that happen throughout the year. So I see the growth of our empathic global civilization occurring through what we decide to do with our cities. Already half the world's population lives in a city, which is expected to grow to 65% in the next 5 years. So there's a major shift going on, and so it seems to be that we have to kind of figure out what to do with our cities, and there's a lot of work being done today around the idea of smart cities. My partner Tracy did a bunch of research yesterday on smart cities. She's really helping me out, so she gave me a whole bunch of links. And there's one in particular that's quite interesting, but maybe I'll just stop here and see where people's heads are at.
Yeah, I mean, I completely am with you on everything that you just said, as usual. Yeah, it seems like there's going to be, we're going to need to organize on a higher level, especially in the centers of where all the commerce and communication and everything is happening. I am really curious to see what the future of rural versus urban looks like, because of course we can't ignore, the rural populations. And I know that we're not saying that anyway, but it'll be really interesting to see, the breakdown of how that, I should say, maybe the mix of rural versus urban populations as time goes on. But I'm totally with you on everything that you just said.
Yeah, I think that when I think about a future world with these kind of newly, really redesigned cities, and the fact that we're all connected now through video conferencing that has completely exploded through COVID.
Oh yeah, and actually one more thing I wanted to say before we actually talk about these smart cities, which I think is going to be really interesting, is that I was at one of the protests, where the Black Lives Matter protests in LA last weekend, and they said about 50,000 people came out, which was a great sized crowd. Hollywood Boulevard was shut down. It was a very joyous occasion. Everyone wore masks. It was great. And I wanted to say that in the video, the author talks about if it's possible for humanity to extend the kind of empathy that we have for people of our same culture or religion to the entire world. And I definitely believe that's happening. There was like an amazing lightness, a spiritual connection I felt when I was at the march. And I've done a lot of political marches for things like climate change and all sorts of other stuff, but this one was really, really special. I mean, it was like everybody was just on the verge of like tears of joy, for like hours and hours. And I have to say, I really feel like that kind of empathy even though, America comes from a very dark past. Obviously, nobody can deny that. I feel like finally, after 400 years, people are starting to understand this concept. And when I was at the protest, I felt that sense. I felt extremely safe, even though I was surrounded by 50,000 strangers. I felt extremely safe and joyous, really joyous in a crowd of total strangers. So anyway, I just wanted to say I feel like sometimes I can feel that humanity is starting to be more empathetic, and it's a great feeling. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool how the world has come together, and now global empathy is a big thing, and I think it's happening. It's happened. We don't really have control over it. What we do have control of is whether a collective intelligence or a collective stupidity emerges from it.
Yeah.
The idea of the state of the internet and how that is becoming the controlling thing that controls the people in our cities.
Mm.
And are we in the current state? We aren't going to leave our future to mob rule, so to speak. So fixing the internet, as well as the action comes out of our cities, and building our communities is really the important things, and having intelligent communities. On the one hand, we have this global empathy, and that goes back to act locally within our communities, and they don't have to be geographical cities, but they have to be communities.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, higher bandwidth communication, face-to-face, makes a huge difference. The bandwidth that we're sharing.
Yes. I love your always urging to turn on the cameras, because it does help a lot. Yeah.
I understand people much better.
Reflecting on what's been said so far. It's kind of interesting at this time. And what I find interesting is reflecting back on technology as we look forward to smart cities and what they might do. It's also important to sort of look back and understand the context in which certain things happen. So in 1965, in Cambridge or Oxford, I can't remember which, a certain James Baldwin turned up to debate whether Black Lives Matter in 1965.
Yeah,
right?
I've seen that amazing lecture.
So
yeah.
what's kind of interesting to reflect on that, and he spoke so brilliantly about it. Roll forward to George Floyd. What makes the George Floyd incident so powerful is that we saw him die in very large numbers. What made the Soweto riots in 1976, what really turned South Africa into a pariah state, was the footage that was released of the shooting of all those children. So time and again, the outrage that people feel and the empathy that is then afforded to whatever that causes seems to me to happen when there is an event. The event no longer has to be 1,000 kids dying. It can be one man dying at the hands of a policeman, live for everyone to see. And that single moment for me, because I've been reflecting on this a lot, and I had a weird thing happen to me as well, which I'll interject within a minute, which I think you'll find very interesting indeed. I class myself as Black British. I'm half South African, Cape coloured by heritage. So Black Lives Matter is a really important slogan for me. And technology has had a major impact on getting that message out there. But equally, it's given voice to All Lives Matter, which is a distraction from the message, which is Black Lives Matter because right now they don't. You know, the dot, dot, dot is always missed off. But I think that event has shown a sea change in how certainly black community here looks at the larger white community that supports that message. You'll always get the factions that say all lives matter, which is simply a white societal, capitalist dominated, racist implemented way of distracting attention that we all know about. You know, it was all predictable. But yeah, when you say that empathy thing, I've never seen more empathy on the streets. What's really important now, it's harder with climate change because it's not like there's this single thing that's died, you know, that, you know, so stark. It's harder with climate change because people don't feel it quite the same way. It's not so shocking because it's so gradual. But perhaps George Floyd's death and the Black Lives Matter movement will cause people to come together out of empathy. And that's got to be good everywhere, hasn't it? That's got to be good everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you look at how many people are now starting to draw the line between climate justice and racial justice. It's really not a far cry to say Black Lives Matter. Therefore, you know, we have to reform our fossil fuel use because, you know, there are certain groups of people who have to live near those places. And, you know, obviously the Green New Deal talks about ending the idea of disposable people or disposable places, which is, you know, something that is catching on with a lot of people. But Darryl, did you want to introduce one of these articles? Because I really wanted to get to the blockchain aspect of this, that you've laid out such a brilliant introduction.
Yeah, I could if you want. There's this one article that kind of stuck out to me by this woman named Krissa McFarlane. She seems really cool. I'd like to actually reach out to her. So this is from October 2019, and the title of the article is Are Smart Cities the Pathway to Blockchain and Cryptocurrency Adoption? So I'll just read out the article because it's fairly short and it gets to the point. So at the recent Blockchain Live 2019 hosted annually in London, I had the pleasure of giving a talk on the next generation infrastructure, building a future for smart cities. What exactly is a smart city? The term refers to an overall blueprint for city designs of the future. Already half of the world's population lives in a city, which is expected to grow to 65% in the next 5 years. Tackling that growth takes more than just simple urban planning. The goal of smart cities is to incorporate technology as an infrastructure to alleviate many of these complexities. Green energy, forms of transportation, water and pollution management, universal identification, wireless internet systems, and promotion of local commerce are all examples of current smart city initiatives. The current technology needs of smart cities are served by what is called the Internet of Things, a term used to describe an overall network of devices with embedded, unique identifiers. Example use cases for these devices include payment for items and traffic management. In London, a traffic management system known as Scoot optimizes green light time at traffic intersections by feeding back magnetometer and inductive loop data to a supercomputer, which can coordinate traffic lights across the city to improve traffic throughout. Barcelona saved £75 million of city funds and created 47,000 new jobs in the smart technology sector by implementing a network of fiber optics throughout the city, providing high-speed Wi-Fi that supports the IoT, and further linking to the integration of smart water, lighting, and parking management. The Netherlands has tested the use of IoT-based infrastructure in Amsterdam, where traffic flow, energy usage, and public safety are monitored and adjusted based on real-time data. Meanwhile, in the US, major cities like Boston and Baltimore have deployed smart trash cans that relay how full they are and determine the most efficient pickup route for sanitation workers. In 2015, India became one of the pioneers to openly enact a smart city mission across 12 of its cities. As governments across the world start to implement these initiatives, blockchain can provide the infrastructure necessary for transaction management. Transparency and security, core fundamentals of blockchain, are two very important elements in a smart city implementation. Today, there are over a dozen smart cities, with less than a quarter that have an active large-scale implementation of the use of blockchain or distributed ledger technology. The city of Dubai has already planned to become the first blockchain-powered smart city by 2021, and the country of Estonia has been using variations of blockchain and distributed ledger technology to keep track of citizens since 2012. Leading smart city developers like Hancom are already supplying products and services from core hardwares of IoT to actual smart city development. Gapyong Meilang Smart Ecosystem, a 470-acre smart city development project, is just one of the many initiatives under the Hancom Group that will incorporate blockchain tech as the basis for smart city development. The most recent project for the group is the development of the Atlanta-based Augury Square. And this woman is from Atlanta. The Augury Square is a 30-acre project that will incorporate blockchain and the use of cryptocurrency, accelerating the concept of digital currency usage into daily life activities for its residents. Example use cases that will improve resident life across cities when implemented with blockchain are without bounds. Information captured and kept in a cloud-based infrastructure utilized by a smart city can be encoded through a blockchain system to ensure the privacy and security of data. The use of blockchain for ID in a smart city can assist with proof of citizenship, voting for public office, and tax data. In addition to security and fraud measures, the elimination of paperwork under such a system connects right with the Smart City Initiative to manage and reduce pollution and waste. Other typical services include the use of internet sensors to detect road maintenance or other general repairs, connection of home utilities and rent to the blockchain, as well as healthcare services. Blockchain healthcare networks, which store protected health data information, can be used when considering emergency situations that involve individuals in a crisis. This is written pre-COVID, providing beneficial to certified first responders in accessing pertinent medical information. What's most important to a smart city, however, is integration. None of the systems mentioned above exist in a vacuum. They need to be put into a single system. Blockchain provides the technology to unite them into a single system that can track all aspects combined. Yeah.
Well, I can't help thinking, it's, after October, after the AGM, assuming that the little SWAT team that's been gathered to look at Zulip can work some magic, and we can have both Zulip, as RChat and a voting mechanism. It seems to me that something that smart cities would truly benefit from would be further democratization within the smart city based on a blockchain, based on RChat, and based on whatever we call it, our vote. And that works against another article you posted, which I read, which was that one about the war games. Well, the US government's been concerned, interestingly enough, as we've got into this sort of COVID crisis. They realise the value of decentralisation, but they also now are starting to think about, oh my God, what does it mean for us, the masters of centralisation? And they're panicking. And they're thinking, we need to be able to control this, because that's what they want to do, control everything. So it seems to me that the way to counter that is if you get voting into the hands of citizens of cities, you start to have, it's kind of interesting, because if you start doing that, there's a natural empathy in the city, going back to that word, because everyone's empowered. They start going in the city, those that don't want to be part of that city leave. And those that do, and if they have a say in what happens day to day, because they've got something like RChat and they've got our vote, then their life changes. Suddenly it's participatory democracy that's localized. Then think globally, act locally becomes really meaningful.
Yes. So like the whole idea of what is a nation? Well, a nation is a collection, a clump of people that are gathered around a culture, uh, a governance system, and a currency. Well, these smart cities, they're starting to form their own currencies.
Yeah.
So it's like that.
The key, it's a dual thing from that article. So there's a dual thing that you have to do. One is you're controlling your treasury from the perspective of all the citizens in your city is a cool thing, because it gives you power to be able to make decisions that impact people's lives day to day, on the one side. And giving voice to the citizens of that city is the other side of that. So now you have empowerment of the people and the means to carry it out.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if it's going to happen, I think you might have spotted something here. These are the targets for us at RChain, these smart cities. I bet you we could get in and we could get an audience with, I bet Greg could get an audience with the woman that was the head of IT for Barcelona. She's really well known in the decentralization community.
Mm.
I can't remember her name, but I'll look it up.
That's awesome. So one more that I just wanted to share that you sent, Darryl, and thanks so much for bringing this topic to my attention, because I think it's, well, to all of our attention, because I think it's really cool. This is from a blog called smartcity.press. This is from February 13th, 2020. And the headline is that the UAE moves towards its goal to become a fully blockchain-powered city by 2021. And what really struck me was just the amount of material and time that these kinds of initiatives can save. I'm just going to read one very short paragraph here. It says, the white paper also throws light on the Dubai blockchain strategy of 2016 and the Emirates federal blockchain strategy of 2018. By considering the statistics, it indicates that the UAE could save over $3 billion by implementing advanced blockchain technologies. They can also eliminate 398 million printed documents and 77 million work hours annually. And it also says, at present, more than 80% of the public and private sector entities are already using the technology in the country. And that really struck me as an interesting statistic, that 80% of the public and private sector entities are already using blockchain technology in the UAE. So I have to check on that statistic. But, you know, one thing that a lot of environmentalists talk about and a lot of people involved in the labor movement is just how much waste we have in terms of people power, in terms of work hours, and in terms of materials. And so it seems like there are huge advantages to sort of revolutionizing our cities, that there's less waste involved. Anyway, I'm just going to put this link in the chat for anybody who wants to review that. It does make some claims that haven't quite been backed up, but I don't think there's any doubt that blockchain infrastructure would, you know, eliminate some level of waste.
I think it's really interesting how quickly we passed from a discussion of empathy to a discussion of blockchain without investigating the connection between those two notions. And I just want to say that, you know, I think it's totally possible for the technological infrastructure to evolve without a connection to these higher level functions, and that we really need to look carefully at how the two fit together. I think a lot about you know, the blockchain as sort of like building the nervous system of, you know, this global entity. But it doesn't necessarily mean that, I mean, there are lots and lots of fully formed humans that do have relatively, you know, statistically normal nervous systems that don't necessarily have a strongly developed empathic response. And so I think that we have to be mindful of what it takes to make sure that as we build out this kind of infrastructure, that it is in service of or in support of the development of the empathic response. And I think Jim is also right in pointing out that, you know, we can have an empathic response that's highly developed, but not connected to a highly developed reasoning function or that kind of capacity. And I do think that those are also separate, but I don't think that, you know, we're not at our full human potential until we can, you know, bring, you know, the hands, the head, and the heart online. All three of them need to be online before we're fully, you know, taking advantage of our human potential. And I think the same is true of these larger collective entities. We need a fully developed, you know, form. So the hands are the metaphor for that. We also need a fully developed heart, and the collective heart is what we were beginning to see when we saw the response to the George Floyd murder. And then we also need a fully developed intellect, a fully developed mind. And so all three of those have to come online for this emerging entity to have regenerative capacity. But it's not just the bits and the bytes. That technology is not sufficient. There's another level of technology that brings about the empathic response, and another kind of technology that brings about the development of the mind. Does any of this make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we have to kind of somehow overcome the evolution of our dogmas that are connected to the idea of nation states that fight over resources. We have to like get past that somehow.
Yeah. So empathy can help us see that. It can help us see that, you know, what we do to one person is what we do to ourselves, and we're starting to see, you know, this larger expansion. What we do to the earth is what we do to ourselves, right? And that really has to be developed, but I think it has to be developed, you know, in a much more fine-grained fashion, right? We have to understand, you know, how the anthill or the beehive is like ourselves and how they're different, you know, and celebrate the connections and celebrate, you know, the strengths, the various strengths. So those are very important steps and stages. But I do believe that in the same way that there's a science of science that goes into the development of the bits and the bytes, there's also a science that goes into developing the empathic response, and a science that goes into developing a kind of mindfulness.
You know, there's a set of cards that are used at Findhorn. I think they're called Gen cards, from the Global Eco Villages community, and they use those cards in an interesting way. They use them to try to reprogram how they operate in a sustainable, generative way, and they kind of act as a guide. I mean, you have to obviously be willing to do it that way to try it out. But it was actually really good because it very much at its center, it encourages this form of empathy in a group setting, so that you get much higher rates of inclusiveness, and you get understanding even in the face of somebody whose opinion is not shared by everyone in the group. There's an empathy for accepting that in a much better way, and it's kind of reprogramming how you collaborate, because there's an element of requiring that, I think, to move forward.
So that's a developing those techniques is really important. One of the interesting things is that people who work with music understand these in a felt sense. They have a direct experience of the synchronizing effect of music. They know what it means directly to talk about harmony. Which is why I often emphasize music as one of the tools and techniques that we can turn to help entrain or develop these capacities.
Yeah, it's important to kind of get that going in children's minds. Get children to learn the power of music in the realm of developing our empathic skills.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I love, Greg, that you mentioned the head, the hands, and the heart, which is such an important concept to understand, that, these three kind of centers of, I guess, intellect or action or, soul or whatever. I don't usually hear people talk about the hands and the heart as much as the head. And I think it's so important that we evolve with all three in mind,
Yeah, and the brain is actually organized in a similar fashion, right? There's a kind of the reptilian brain, and then a more sort of emotional brain, and then there's higher thinking capacity. I don't necessarily like the word higher, but that's typically how it's thought about. and so that this organization, and it's not so much that there's this neat layering, that there isn't crosstalk across these systems, that there's certainly this kind of recursive reentrancy across these systems, but they are readily anatomically distinguishable. So it's not just woo woo. There's some objective phenomena that are associated with those notions.
Oh, absolutely. And just to connect it back to what I was saying before, and what Darryl actually started the call with is, why would people have these responses to disasters like Haiti and to the murder of George Floyd and all these other people? And, if these types of responses were not in our brains already,
Mm-hmm.
comes from a very science-based place. So anyway, are there any final comments? Because we have a staff meeting in 5 minutes.
Well, speaking of music and developing a more collective consciousness, I want to mention that yesterday the Crown Ensemble, the Crown Collective, which is one that I'm involved in kind of as a resident cat herder status, had an interview with Anthony Garone's show, Make Weird Music. The interview is up on YouTube. Yes, Nora just posted the link. Thank you, Nora.
You're welcome. I can see it coming from a mile away. So
thank you. So yeah, have a look at that if you're interested. And as usual, I'm really so grateful to have these conversations. So just wanted to thank everyone for covering the topics we covered today.
Yeah, this one was great, Darryl. Thank you so much for bringing that awesome presentation in the beginning.
Oh, thanks.
And thank you so much to Steve and to Jim Whitescarver for joining us. And also thank you, Ian, for joining us as well. We didn't hear from Ian today, but he's here. And thank you, Greg. So please subscribe to RChain on YouTube if you haven't, and you can become a member of RChain at rchain.coop. And if you're listening to this or you've listened to past RCast and you'd like to be included on one of the next ones, just send an email to climate@rchain.coop and we'll respond to you as soon as we can. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Nora.
Thank you, Nora.
Thank you, Nora.
See you another time soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.